To the US now, and a New York court's decision on whether to uphold Donald Trump's criminal conviction in that hush money case has been delayed yet again, with the judge postponing any decision or any sentencing until at least the 19th of November. The judge might decide to throw out the case on the grounds that it would be covered by the recent US Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity. In May, a jury found Trump guilty of falsifying business records, making him the first former president ever convicted of a criminal offence. Well, more on this from France 24's Jessica Le Mesurier in New York.
Judge Juan Merchan has paused proceedings in Donald Trump's hush money case. He was supposed to decide today whether or not Trump's conviction could be thrown out due to the Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity. But now we're going to be waiting a bit longer. Proceedings are paused until November 19th. This comes after prosecutors with Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office sent Merchan an email back on Sunday asking him to pause proceedings due to Trump's election victory and his upcoming inauguration. Trump had asked the office to agree to this delay, according to prosecutors. They wrote, "The people agree that these are unprecedented circumstances." Merchan now has paused these proceedings, so we're going to have to wait until next Tuesday to find out whether or not Trump is going to be off the hook. Back in May, a jury found Trump guilty on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in a scheme to influence the 2016 election. That made him the first former president ever convicted of a felony. Now we're going to be waiting another week to find out what will happen.
Well, for more on this story, I'm joined now from Washington on the line by Eric Lisann, who is a former US Federal Prosecutor. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Lisann. Welcome to the programme. I want to start by asking you about the options for decisions in this hush money case that's coming up. So will they uphold the conviction? What about sentencing? You know, what are their choices? What are they going to do now that Donald Trump is president-elect and has been convicted of a criminal offence?
Let's start with what they're supposed to have been doing, which was getting ready for the sentencing, which had already been put off in order to wait for the electoral campaign to finish. Now, the only thing that has changed since even the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity is that we have had the election and Trump has won. The law has been exactly the same since then. And on the issue of the law as to whether or not the case was properly brought according to the new dictates manufactured by the U.S. Supreme Court regarding presidential immunity, there was already a decision and a strong position taken by the prosecution, which was upheld by the judge, that such a small portion of the case really touched on anything remotely relating to official conduct, that it wouldn't affect the verdict and that the verdict should stand. So to the extent that that is now being reexamined, of course, it is a surprise. Nothing has changed other than the fact that Trump has been elected. And therein really lies the issue, which is, does the fact that now the defendant is the sitting president, not just the former president, change the calculus? It can't logically change it in terms of the weight of the evidence against him or the way in which the evidence was presented to a jury or whether improper evidence was submitted, because that's already been briefed, at least and ruled on, at least by this level. But it appears that the prosecution really is motivated by the fact that, wow, now the defendant is the sitting president of the United States. Do we really want to go forward? And it may be a case where, as we approach the sentencing here, we might be advocating for jail. And how can we possibly do that? So the prosecution seems to be getting cold feet. And of course, if they indicate that to the judge is going to take a step back as well. And that's where all the parties are now. So to get back to your original question, what are the options? They could throw out the case. That would seem to make no sense, but they could do that. They could also say, in light of the fact that the defendant is now the sitting president, we have to put the case in suspense. Or they could say, in light of that fact, we simply have to pretend like the case never happened and throw it out on that basis, not on the basis of the sufficiency of the evidence. Those are the options now available before the court.
Do you have any inkling of which way it might go? I mean, you're saying that just because of the sheer messiness of this, it might be the case that not that the conviction is not upheld, because as you say, it's hard not to uphold it, nothing new has come out, but that the sentence might perhaps be suspended, and then would he serve his sentence after his term?
That is one possibility, and I think that's one of the things that the prosecution has, and the other side, Trump's side, has to brief, and the judge has to rule on what would be the mechanics for imposing and more importantly, serving a sentence. The judge did indicate, even during the trial, when Trump was violating contempt orders, that he didn't want to impose what would be a normal sentence of contempt under those circumstances, which would have been immediately remanding or locking up Trump because of the fact of the campaign, and that Trump, theoretically at least, could be the next president. Now it's actually happened. So we know that there's definitely worries there and cause for concern. They don't really want to be trailblazers, and now they're in that position. So that is one of the options, that they could hold the whole sentencing in suspense, or they could just say, look, we don't even want to do that. We're just going to throw out the entire case. I think the judge is really going to take his cues from what the prosecution submits now in the course of the coming week.
A lot of US citizens think that the justice system in the US is biased, in this case, biased against Donald Trump. Those on the right think so, but there are numerous instances. Why is there so little trust in the system in the US? Is it to do with the fact that some of these are, in fact, political appointees? I mean, how does it work?
Well, I don't know if there's really that an organic bias, as you say. Certainly there's a sense of outrage by Trump's camp that has been ginned up or stoked or amplified, which comes from the right. But the evidence was overwhelming, and I think most people see the strength of the evidence is indisputable, and it was tried to a jury of Trump's peers. Now, part of the argument that the right, that Trump's base has put forward in objecting to this, is that it took place in Manhattan, and that supposedly everybody in Manhattan hates Donald Trump, and therefore he couldn't get a fair trial there. But that's where the crimes occurred, and Trump was tried the same way as anybody else. And everybody there, the judge and the parties, were scrupulously following, the prosecution rather, were scrupulously following the rules of evidence. But we are in a very heavily politicized environment, which has been stoked that way by the Trump campaign. They saw it to their advantage to do that. We're coming off months and months of repeating these claims. And the defense against all of these criminal cases that have been brought against Donald Trump is exactly that they're political. And now the fact that they're going away because he's been elected effectively is going to give him further fodder to claim that. Indeed. But we have to look at the evidence. It's been very, very strong.
OK, well, we'll have to leave it. That's fascinating, Eric Lisann. Thank you so much for your time. Eric Lisann, there, former. Thank you so much. We're going to move on now to Germany.